start. Thank you, and hello to everybody as well who have joined already. Especially we have two extraordinary guests, Alexandra Segalinska. I think I have pronounced it right.
Quite well, yes.
Thank you, Google. So no joke, I knew how the name is pronounced. And Wolfgang Kindreich, whom I as well know, is from Austria, from Down Graz. From No Center, actually. He's the director, and Alexandra is, of course, you know, she has many roles and working as well as influencer, and she researches and as well works at MIT. Two very high profile people, and today we're about to discuss a little bit about the topic of how AI is fostering the ongoing dehumanization of decision making. Right. So yeah, so I would say I would suggest us to organize this discussion round in a like very open manner. So I will be asking questions, and both of you you know, say something about or answer the question, and we will like openly discuss as well. Maybe for if there are some questions in the forum or in the chat room, I will of course pass them through. So yeah, let's start. Sorry, I am having a little bit of problem. So yeah, so first question actually to Wolfgang. Actually to both of you, but let's start with Wolfgang. I mean, as I'm working at Lufthansa, and it is the aviation sector is majorly hit by the crisis, and we cannot talk about the AI without talking about the crisis. So as I'm seeing right now that the current crisis has shown that the dehumanization of extremely critical fields of public and private sectors, just as maybe energy sector, healthcare, maybe aviation or transportation itself, you know, related decision making would be inevitable in future. So the dehumanization will is taking place, you know, place, and it will be accelerating pretty much in upcoming months and years. So what are your thoughts on that? What are you seeing currently, and where are we going? Because in No Center, I know that there are a lot of projects ongoing on those topics. So what is your thought that topic?
Well, are we really seeing a dehumanization? That would be my question in reverse, because I mean, you could make the case that due to the coronavirus crisis, there is a dehumanization or a move into virtual collaboration between people in all kinds of manners. So I do not really see AI being in the focus of this development here. So take as an example one typical decision-making thing we do with a big insurance company. Standard rating models would rate companies and the risk assigned to credit volume and so on based on the various financial numbers of these companies, which are only published in monthly or quarterly intervals. So you're always behind with your view on a company and the risk associated. So what we do there is to gather weak signals from online sources, basically open source intelligence, take a look at the data, see if there are weak signals showing that a company is in trouble. Can this replace traditional rating models? Certainly not. It is a hint, and a hint that can only be contextualized and processed by a human being. Why? Because there's way too much context to put even in a state-of-the-art AI system for such a complex task. So just take an example that you read several bad news about a company, but at the same time you know that some competitor is running some kind of campaign on that, or you know that something political is going on which you never fed into the AI. So the final decision is always in the hands of an expert, of an interpreter, and our job with weak AI is to reduce the workload and to redefine the work partitioning between machine and human here. And if the human is remotely working, completely safe of any virus, except the computer virus, of course, or if the person is sitting in a room with other experts, doesn't come into play. So in general, for many decision-making situations, I don't think that is the case, actually.
I mean, just to give you an example from aviation, um, the navigation throughout the crisis is of course for sure for most of the part human based. I mean, it's a human based economy, but nevertheless parts of it as prediction, like where could be the next coronavirus outbreak and stuff like this, to bring it in a bigger context of how Lufthansa or other bigger airlines as Delta and so on should navigate, and what decisions they could make in terms of prediction. There is a kind of dehumanization of quantitative topics I can see, like based on data analysis, at least that the quantitative help is getting increased, maybe. Yeah, so that helps eventually, I guess, in decision making. But what is your side, Alexandra, from a researching perspective?
Mhm.
What is currently like happening that might be new?
Uh, Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I tend to agree with Wolfgang here and support some of his statements. So, first of all, what I would say is that we definitely do see dehumanization understood as absence of humans. That is related to the fact that we are supposed to be far away from each other, right? That in the pandemic situation, people are searching for spaces that feel safe, that feel confined, that are less crowded. You also have some sort of new design in many different places. I look at architecture, most contemporary trends the ones that I've seen, for instance, built here in Europe, some new buildings built just now, touchless, completely touchless, right? So you have definitely new ideas about how people should gather, how they should spend time. And I've even encountered this notion of ambient wellness that is all about being kind of alone, together, probably remotely, probably through a technological platform, but alone. So you definitely see a certain design, I would say, or infrastructure that is supposed to be somehow human-less. And in that sense, I see a lot of that happening and a big acceleration of this trend, particularly in terms of physical infrastructure. But in terms of, what you said about, decision making, that's obviously a very big topic, because you have algorithmic decision making here and there, right, in different, I would say, settings, right? So you have algorithmic decision making, quite a lot of that in the financial sector, for instance. You have more and more of that in logistics or transportation, and you see some projects that are not necessarily AI driven, right? So it doesn't have to be some sort of deep network, neural network operating here. It can just be a very good algorithmic bundle that is going to replace some of the processes. But what I wanted to kind of highlight perhaps is that what we are researching at the American Institute for Economic Research at my university in Warsaw, which is Kosminski University, and also at MIT and Harvard, is coborization. So let's say pretty much a track of thinking where you are not trying to replace humans, or there is no attempt to really get rid of humans and give the job away to the algorithm or a neural network, if that's even possible, but rather to create spaces of collaboration between humans and machines where they can effectively work together. And our research, I'm happy to share some more details later, is very much focused on that. And we saw a major increase in terms of effectiveness of humans when they are working with a well-tailored AI system that is essentially a decision support system as of today, rather than a decision-making system. So this is where we are right now. But obviously, far-fetched future can obviously show different directions that we don't get to see yet, that are just weak signals at this point.
Yeah, for sure. There is an acceleration as well in data collection itself, I would say. Again, an example from Vienna, in the middle of the crisis, the Viennese municipal department, the Department of Garbage Disposal and Electricity, announced they will be, there will be volunteers, co-workers who will quarantine themselves for the whole lockdown phase. So then the big question actually came out, like why we cannot automatize those processes that those human beings can go home despite being heroes actually, right, for the society and offering themselves in such manner. But nevertheless, I think there is an acceleration, as both of you are mentioning, in process automation itself, most probably, on one hand, but on the other hand as well on the data side, maybe, so that in near future for bigger AI solutions, those aspects can be connected with each other. So there are a lot of aspects and a lot of technology coming up that are not connected with each other, maybe. But Alexandra, we are looking forward to hear a little bit more from that end, as you mentioned. So, I mean, speaking of those, everybody's talking about AI since a couple of years. It's a big hype right now, as if it was something new. But the issue of the regulation of such systems or such mechanisms, technical mechanisms, are as well as old as the AI, the term itself, I think. So, but now with all the automotive driving topics, and as well in aviation, we have a lot of automation going on, that since decades within the cockpit as well. So where are we standing right now? The question to you both, maybe whoever likes to pick up the question first, go ahead, please. The topic would be, the question would be, what are or what should be the regulations, or are we having still a weak point there? Is something happening exactly? Can you see both project-wise and research-wise something happening in that end, on that end?
Yes, well, I think that currently the problem about regulations which come into play in issues like automated driving are that when you go to the very edge of what AI can do, as we have weak AI, you always have things that humans can do quite well. And by quite well, I mean in a way that other humans, most of us, accept this. So you can drive a car quite well, at least enough that I accept that you can be another traffic participant besides me. No, I'm taking the risk to meet you in traffic. I don't know how high that risk is. I never saw you driving, but still I assume that it works. And then the closer you get with this kind of work to what AI can do, the more problematic it gets. And on the very edge of this is automated driving. In fact, automated driving is already beyond that. So automated driving could already drive more safely than you in many situations. There are other examples like this decision-making. In many decision-making processes, you realize after a time that your machine learning algorithm could do better decisions than you. Still, you don't leave it completely to the algorithm. And this is because you do not trust the algorithm, and you do not trust it because you do not understand how it operates, because you cannot contextualize its decisions in your decision framework, because it has a totally different way of thinking. This is a major research goal for us at No Center. We have the overarching research goal of building trustworthy and understandable, self-explaining and secure artificial intelligences. The problem currently is that for the typical, say, Styrian, we are located in Styria, as you know, the typical Styrian challenges are in the automotive sector, in the aerospace sector, in the high-tech manufacturing sector. And you can simply not accept any decisions by a machine there if you cannot later on certify that everything was above board and everything worked as it should. So we can, in the end, only really roll out algorithms which can be completely understood, at least in singular decision cases, and proven. And this is what we are currently working on. And I think that wherever you can reach that kind of transparency, you are really taking one step towards dehumanization in a positive sense. You can there put the decision into the hands of the machine with a good conscience.
Yeah, if I could just
in terms of regulation, sorry,
yeah,
Alexandra,
just wanted to follow up, because I think Wolfgang has just mentioned a very important field that is an important research field, explainability, right? Transparency, and kind of understanding what this black box of different algorithmic bundles really unfolds is a major quest, I would say, as of today. It's an ethical quest. It's a quest of scalability as well, right? Because if you really don't provide explainability to the level that is sufficient, there will be many, many fields where you cannot scale AI, and it won't be beneficial to you. So that's one thing. I'm quite sure that there will be a lot happening in terms of algorithmic bias, right? So any type of discriminatory behavior on the side of algorithms, right? We've seen that here and there. We've seen some cases of algorithmic bias of different kinds. Can be ethnical, can be gender-based, but can be also like very trivial, right? In a sense that you can have a network that is working on diagnosing patients, and if it's working on American data, it will just not work well in Europe, for instance, in some cases. And if it's not fixed, it's going to misdiagnose people, right? And that's also a case of algorithmic bias, right? So I'm expecting either some sort of codes of conduct or some sort of self-regulation encouragement to that, or even like a hard regulation. Who knows? European Commission at this point is working, has provided one white paper regarding artificial intelligence and its current, unfoldings. How is it going to be developed in Europe, incentivized, but also how is the ethical framework for artificial intelligence going to look like? So how aligned will it be with European values? And here you see ideas like data minimization or small data, right? Whereas instead of using as much data as you can, you're trying to elegantly use minimum data to get the same result, right? And you are not fighting the problem of let's say, privacy. You are trying to kind of secure that, which is an important European value. So I would say that there's quite a lot going on. I have no idea where it's going to go. In the US, everybody talks about self-regulation all the time. They are quite hesitant. But in Europe, I think we can expect, let's say, among the member states of the EU, at least some interesting debates, and who knows, perhaps regulations as well.
Perhaps if I may add something here. The thing is that we can only have regulations when we are able to understand what these systems are doing, because usually you regulate in that way that you to make certain limitations to the algorithms you are using. So probably there will be a step where we regulate. Perhaps before that already, there will be a step where we introduce standards. So currently the AI field is pretty much standardless. So everybody is doing everything in a very chaotic manner. Frameworks are springing up, are being replaced almost daily. And probably some kind of standardization and certification will be a first step towards then having a regulation by the legislators.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, and thanks, Alexander, as well for mentioning the so-called white paper from the European Union, as well active in that domain. So it's the white paper for for information for the participants for a trustworthy AI, right? They brought up last year, I guess. So at least we are moving towards standardization and trying to get things done, but that could be as well a head start, right, Alexandra, in terms of in this, especially in this field. We saw, I mean, it's an example which has nothing to do with AI, but in Europe we had, like, especially in Central Europe, after the Corona crisis, all of a sudden every country and every organization was building kind of a Corona tracking app, so where will be the outbreak, and everybody saw, and actually I know someone actually from China said it's way too slow in Europe, while in China or other less democratic countries, this kind of innovations happen very fast because of the deregulation, absolutely deregulation, I would say. Seeing from that angle, we still, I mean, we have a chaotic situation, Wolfgang, yes, of course, but it's still way more, I would say, looked into and taken care of, I mean, the matters of ethical topics and so on, than somewhere else. So that could be a head start for European companies as well. I would be rather interested, Alexander, do you have a specific example you maybe saw somewhere down the line of self-regulating kind of, of those kind of innovations from the United States? Because I haven't seen or heard about something like that yet.
Well, thanks. It's a good question indeed. So first, perhaps just referring back to what you said about China, obviously it's a completely different domain in terms of data exchange, data transfer.
Exactly.
But let's be honest, in the future, I don't think big data paradigm is the paradigm. You know, at some point where you reach a critical mass of data, and many European operators of data, both private and public, already have quite enough. The importance lies again in how the network is designed and how it's going to be adjusting that data, right? So it's not going to be the quest of data in the future. I think the quest is elsewhere, perhaps in the hardware, you know, in the quantum computers. So we'll see, right? I mean, maybe the approach to kind of be slower with the data and still stick to the values is going to be in the long run an acceptable approach and a competitive one too. That's a speculation at this point. But now what you said is very interesting about self-regulation. What I would encourage those who are interested to have a look at is Berkman Klein Center at Harvard, because they've recently created a sort of very opulent charter of different types of self-regulation mechanisms provided both by, or some sort of at least proposals of regulations provided by international bodies such as OECD, European Commission, and whatnot. On the other side, on NGOs that are looking into this sphere and also proposing something actively like AI Now or, you know, I don't know, some others as well. But on top of that, there were some self-regulations by private companies, right? So let's say Microsoft, IBM, Google, at this point, I think also perhaps Facebook, are actively proposing, let's say, certain mechanisms to get rid of the bias. I'm not saying that they always work perfectly. I'm not sure to what extent they are being executed, right? Because I'm not an insider. But what I do know is that these charters and attempts to self-regulate before the regulation comes, or well, in situations where the regulation doesn't come, for instance, are definitely happening. And I was quite shocked, to tell you the truth, because what I saw was Tencent from China also having self-regulation regarding eliminating algorithmic bias, right? So obviously, I'm quite sure that's very pragmatic of them to create that, right? But it is true that we see here and there, and it's a full list of at least 60 different attempts, very often similar to each other, sometimes a bit different, that go into direction of regulating explainability, control, question of privacy, human rights, and whatnot. So that's definitely happening, and Berkman Klein is a very good resource to check it out.
Yeah, thank you for those inputs, and I for sure will take a closer look into it. Now, let's move on. Next question goes in your direction, Wolfgang. Where do you think, because I mean, everybody is willing to implement AI somehow. If you're a startup nowadays and you have in your portfolio somewhere written AI, it's like the biggest hype, and you're getting the job done. In the, you know, when talking about like terms, at least, and not about the project realization itself, but where do you see the biggest challenges of companies right now, or projects where you are involved right now in implementing, when implementing AI solutions, or intending to even, you know, implement the pre-stage of AI? We can include as well topics of process automation, data collection, or quantitative data collection, actually, for bigger, you know, more intelligent algorithms and models. So where are the biggest showstoppers right now from your point of view?
Thank you for this interesting question. First, I have to say that, of course, the Know Center is a European research organization. We are located in Graz with about 150 data scientists. And we are pretty well networked in Europe, including BBVA and so on. But this is a really European point of view you will get from my side. Currently, the biggest problem we are facing is the lack of standards and interfaces between the different data silos in industry. My reasoning for that is a bit like, well, to put it simple, we already lost all the B2C or the B2C business to the US. So there's nothing to do there for Europe. As much as I would like to see a European search engine, a European social network, these B2C use cases, currently for sure for the next years, we have to more or less leave to the US. The second thing is then, what are we very good in? We are good in high technology production, in highly optimized, complex production. And that's a good thing. That's a thing that only we can really do very well. So that's a unique selling point for us, besides our liberal and rights-oriented policies. But this means that the use of AI in European industry is very much oriented towards optimization, perhaps a bit towards also data-driven business in the sense of leveraging data, of course, or of monetizing data, but not the kind of small company disruption growing quickly with a huge consumer market segment. And this is still a field where you can have huge gains, both in productivity and in product innovation, as long as you can use and exchange and transform your own data. But the current situation is that you buy, say, a Werkzeugmaschine, a molding machine or whatever, from one manufacturer, and you get the data operating system from this manufacturer. Of course, everyone is trying to keep this on his or her platform, so you even get their platform. You buy the next machine, you get the next manufacturer. And only the very largest companies, like say VW, can really afford also in political terms to impose some kind of standards they developed for themselves to their suppliers, for instance. But then again, you have a supplier standard specific to one of the big companies. And what's really lacking is standards across these different providers and suppliers and across the different companies. There are very interesting things going on here. If you know, perhaps the Gaia X proposal for data exchange architecture here, this is very promising. So this would really open up the silos and be a real boost to our attempts to introduce more AI in the European high-tech production.
Yeah, thank you for answering the question. Alexandra, do you have some inputs on that topic? Or I mean, from my point of view, maybe to foster the discussion a little bit, in aviation especially, it is pretty much on the prediction side right now, which got accelerated throughout the crisis. And not only, you know, in terms of, I would say, mechanical or engineering aspects like predictive maintenance, but much more as well the decision making itself about on those topics, like when do I have to order paint for my A320, Airbus 320, or when do I have to already somehow repair some parts that are not broken yet. So this is a kind of decision making on a very low level on the process chain. But still those are, like, from my point of view, happening especially in field of aviation. But on top of everything, like the you know, at the top of the pyramid is the decision making at highest level, like where is my business navigating to, or where do I have to, you know, measure something due to the crisis to, you know, stay in business and not become bankrupt or something like this. So this kind of decision making is not AI driven yet, or not, I would say not automation driven in the first place. Whatever they're using is quantitative support from various systems, like here a KPI, there a prediction kind of, and they're trying to, the decision makers are trying to usually, you know, draw a big picture out of those, you know, scattered pieces and trying to make decisions. That's what I'm seeing. What is your impression, Alexandra?
Well, I think you are right, because what we have is a lot of hype, a lot of discourse and discussion, and perhaps a bit less of implementation, perhaps less than we would like, at least in some domains. So what I see, for instance, giving Poland as an example, I've been here for quite a few months. I'm originally Polish. Because of coronavirus, I landed in Europe and did not return to the US, but I had an opportunity to observe lots of things and consult with many companies. What I've noticed is that they're very good at pilot projects, and they're very generous in terms of bringing some advancements that are quite incremental, but they are not so good in scaling artificial intelligence and thinking about it like, in that fully fledged way where it's really transforming your business. So that's a problem. I think the problem is between a pilot and scaling, right? So you do know that you can solve certain narrow problems with artificial intelligence, or you can, I don't know, try out a new natural language processing tool and build yourself a bot for your call center. But this is definitely not holistic, right? So we have a bit of a problem with that translation from little to scale. And I think in Europe it is a problem, but it's also a problem in the US. So I would say that this is very true for both spaces, that translating AI, road mapping artificial intelligence, taking artificial intelligence to leadership and really making it productive is a big problem. And on the other hand, you have companies that are AI native, right? Those that stem from artificial intelligence. And that's completely different as a standpoint when you think about Spotify, where currently the whole recommendation engine is built on, clustering and other machine learning methods and whatnot. And this is what they're really offering. So apart from content, what they're offering is the way they kind of mesh that content for you. And that's core of their business model. So in that case, you have a company that is an AI native, an AI pioneer. So for this company to kind of spread artificial intelligence, I think it's a bit easier, right, than it is for a company that it has been doing something else and needs to try AI now because everybody's talking about it. And also perhaps there's a promise of a new revenue stream, right, a new type of market insight that you can get from artificial intelligence, new type of segmentation. But for that, you need order in your data and you need a roadmap. And I think that's perhaps the strategic thinking is sometimes missing.
Yeah. Especially, I would like to add up a point to what you said, Alexander. I think it's directly connected with the scalability you were mentioning. It's the productionizing itself as well, right? So out of POC environment where you try out things, where you in the first place see if something is working, and then to scale it and as well set it in a real life environment where different data standards are getting ingested and so on. Is the toughest thing as well, I think, from what I've been seeing so far. But still, in terms of countries like India, they have been using, like, whatever you do in India is big data because of the vast amount of people living there, and the population is huge. And they have been actually, working on a decision level, making level, pretty much dehumanized in certain areas, like garbage disposal, and as well like digital payments, where they actually are using a lot of data, from quantitative data, transaction data as well, to detect fraud. I saw it back in even 2016. So there are apparently certain, I would say, certain levels of progression right now. So I mean, US is most probably the most progressed market regarding AI. As Wolfgang mentioned, a lot of innovations are coming from that part of the world, Europe as well, and China for sure. But when we talk, when you think about the especially about the socioeconomic impacts, now we can talk a little bit about that topic as well. What do you, Wolfgang, think that will be happening in the private sector, right? We can talk about later on about the society itself as well. But will AI and AI-driven decision making, but as well working itself, become a head start for companies? Will they be existing and the others not? What is your perspective on that? It's a little bit hypothetical question, but still I think it's quite interesting for the audience.
Well, one thing is that the traditional strengths we have in Europe is this this very high quality and production of complex things. And this stems directly from a very high level of training of our working force. So we are really talking about having people who are very highly trained, typically in stuff like material sciences, machinery, and so on, so operating systems. And all of that now becomes intertwined with AI. It's not the kind of revolution you really have, say, in the customer relationship management sector, where we reached 2 or 3 years ago this level of conversational AI, where you can really set a computer to answer the first 10 questions before then switching to a human operator. But it's more like that a worker in a very complex factory does not get replaced, but gets assisted by more and more and more assistive AI systems. And it wouldn't be in the interest of the company to replace this person. Personnel costs are not the problem. The problem are the cost for educating this person. So actually your goal is not to replace this person, but your goal is to keep this person up to date. So what we are seeing is very strongly a move towards work integrated learning. Of course, learning on the job, learning your whole life. And let's say that the borders are really getting fuzzy between working, between training a trainee or an AI, being assisted by an AI, or being trained by an AI while you solve a problem, So all these situations imply something like learning, something like recommendation and help and work division between machine and human, and something like still human expertise. And this is something which I think will impact profoundly the workforce, and so also the private sector, as you said. This is something everybody will feel. So you have to continuously learn, and you have to learn in very unconventional or new settings.
Yeah, so it can become a single point of selling for companies who are evolving in those technologies, right? So on the socioeconomic side, let's come back to the question once again. Like, it goes back, of course, to the regulation topics, but still, when the question would be, what is the scientific aspect of questionings or standpoints? Like, if I'm leading today people, I am their boss. So I am actually, when they're doing mismanaging something or failing in day-to-day work, or failing in projects, it's kind of on my shoulders. But still, if an fully automatic algorithm, or like machine driven kind of piece of technology makes mistakes, should it be as well like my failure because I decided for that system or to implement those kind of solutions within my department or business areas? What is happening, or what can we expect in upcoming years on that end? Because many people are willing to even try out some technologies, even though in POC phase or early stages, but they are not willing because it's not known to them what will happen at the end of the day if there's something if something bad happens. Yeah.
So if I could refer to your question, because obviously in that research that I've mentioned that we are conducting, that question sort of emerged. So I can just say very briefly that what we did was for managerial professions, specifically marketing and running, designing new campaigns and ads, we've decided to create different types of virtual assistants that were doing different things for the workers depending on what they wanted, right? So some wanted help in budgeting, some wanted to be kind of helped out in calling the customers, and yet some others wanted to do competitive analysis about how others did it and what virality they've reached. And it turned out that you can cater to many different needs of people, and you are, as we were saying at the beginning, designing somehow assistive tools that are both productive and still the work is very satisfactory for people. Actually, in our control group that has used those technologies, it turned out that people were much happier doing the things they really wanted to do in their jobs, right? And being somehow, well, not replaced, but complemented by technology in the areas that were a bit more mundane for them. But I believe that what you are asking is a question of the future. So at this point, and I think for a long time from now, everything, including our legal system, the legal framework, is designed in such a way that there needs to be a human signature, right? A human approval. within every process. Even if that process is co-designed with technology, we don't have currently a solution for that, right? You can say, okay, when you have a bank and you have a loan officer who is looking at different types of loans, right? Very often he's assisted by different types of algorithms that are helping out. Still, the decision is his or hers. Similarly, when a doctor performs a medical diagnosis, currently we have a lot of telemedicine because of COVID, and you have a lot of tools being used to kind of check whether symptoms are appearing or not, and deciding sick or not sick, ill or not ill. And usually that expertise of technology is trusted by humans, and then humans take over the responsibility. But Wolfgang started talking about autonomous vehicles, and I think it's a great example for the future, where you have a co-driver or perhaps even an autonomous driver on the side of the machine. And then the question of responsibility is a big one, right? Because there is the producer of the car that could be responsible, the software team that designed kind of this specific network could be specifically responsible. If it's a co-driving mechanism and even learning from the human driver, then the human could be co-responsible for whatever happened, if something happened. And then we can have some sort of other concepts of even distributed responsibility in the future, right? Where you share responsibility, because clearly automotive sector would not like to have that responsibility that they've never had before. And I kind of understand their standpoint. So it's very hard, but I think we are at a very interesting verge of figuring out how to share that responsibility when the decision-making process is very complex and depends on many factors, because we were quite straightforward so far. And now all these technologies are kind of forcing us, I think, to make a change. And so, sooner or better, this change, I don't see how conceptually it will yet be unfolding, but definitely is going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Just got a question because you talked about the health sector, especially in these times. It's like major focus of many people. The question to both of you: what is happening in the health sector regarding AI? Because that's apparently one area where dehumanization was actually pretty much welcome until a certain level. Even before the crisis, I for myself at least knew a couple of robots and so on doing kind of surgeries on human and so on, but it was not mainstream. So having seen that, how such a pandemic, how devastating such a pandemic can become and be, we have to actually save our personal people, right, who are working at hospitals in the health sector in general. So the humanization makes absolutely sense, even though it's not a direct decision making, but it's still like health issue. So what can we expect out of this or after this crisis, in terms of implementing more and more AI solutions in those specific fields? Maybe Wolfgang first.
Well, there's a lot going on, and in the medical field and in the pharmaceutical field. And let me start perhaps with the pharmaceutical field, where AI really has an interesting role. If you have considered the pharmaceutical value chain, they have a huge problem with scaling up, because at some of the big pharma companies I visited, you really have this separation of the research, the development, the production phase, even institutionalized in the infrastructure. So they have different buildings, different architectural styles and everything. So they have the silo par excellence. And artificial intelligence is building bridges here, bridges between different data silos, bridges also between different experts talking different languages. And by that, so to say, increasing the scaling or making it easier to scale up. If you consider current talk about the vaccinations, we can expect the main problem is producing it in that big a number, and not only producing, but also developing a production process which is certified. And there AI can help a great deal. Of course, everybody thinks the first thing where AI can help is in researching and actually finding new things. And of course, stuff like virtual chemistry and so on is very interesting in this classical AI country. But for data-driven artificial intelligence, where we have algorithmically really making the big strides in the past years, There again, it's almost simple production matters or these bridging matters, much like in other production industries, where we will see a big increase in efficiency and the bridging function of AI. In the medical sector itself, before the virus, the big topic was personal. I think we were at the conference together, talking about these topics last year. So the big topic there was personalized medicine, personalized biomarkers, and so on. We were still shooting with one medical compound at 100,000 people who are all different. And AI promised and still promises, of course, to be able, data-driven AI, to be able to individualize this targeting and to build medical procedures and compounds very specific to each person. If we to connect this to the current crisis, if you take a look at how this virus behaves, it seems that that would be a very important contribution also to the current pandemic, because what we see is a virus which is deadly to people who are elderly. No, not to people who are elderly and have certain preconditions. So if you try to determine how deadly exactly the virus is, you very quickly end up with very narrow target groups. And knowing that, of course, the treatments should also be very specific. And these are things where AI is good, where I can easily identify the patterns in the large amounts of data. So this is really in the medical field, I think, will accelerate all the personalized medicine efforts we already had.
I would just perhaps add to that, you know, taking into account certain weak signals that could detect civilizational threats such as pandemics. We've had great examples, for instance, from Canada, the very famous project that is called Blue Dot, that was actually marking that there was something going on in Wuhan already in early November. And it's a natural language processing tool that is working in 65 languages and dialects and is really good at, you know, searching for keywords, or very well trained in searching for keywords that are kind of specific for an early spread of pandemics. So we have, as Wolfgang said, you know, diagnostics, therapy, but we also have a lot of weak signal detection, right? And certain predictive tools that can help us model the situation that we may be in. And I think there were very little of such companies, medtech companies, that were doing that stuff. And then currently, I think looking even at VCs that are desperate to find good companies that they could invest in this field, there will be definitely more happening also in Europe. Aline, I think you are muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the insights. I mean, the healthcare sector has been like the major focus even before I can remember, Wolfgang. We were together sharing a panel, I guess, at the beginning of the year. This question came up. And at that time, everybody in Europe and especially in Austria was assuming that the coronavirus will not reach us, right? So I think that's one of the sectors who are who can be the major gainer for on the long run of the crisis itself, but as well the humanization itself, because it's actually willingly done in that field. Last thing I would maybe discuss with you guys where that part of socioeconomic impact we left out that I'm particularly interested in, because eventually I don't know even the term of bedingungslose Grundeinkommen and don't want to start about talking it. It's like, without any term, a payment of government to its citizens, without any terms. So when jobs are getting lost more and more because of automation and AI-driven technologies, who will be paying the taxes and who will be working in near future, these kind of topics. But that's a too much philosophical and hypothetical standpoint. But still, when we look at like the working world right now, or corporate world, how people are working, how value is being generated between people and within an economy that is actually designed for people and from people, from human beings. Where do you see the biggest challenge on that end? Like what is happening right now? We can see that more and more jobs are getting lost, not because of AI only, but automation itself, and it has been happening since decades in the Western Hemisphere, but it is getting accelerated somehow. And how AI could change the whole landscape on that end, maybe that would be the last question to both of you. That would be a nice one as well to close the discussion.
For a look into the far future, I can only point to where AI is really almost all powerful and has very much changed all the social constructs. I really can recommend look at the books of Ian M. Banks, a British science fiction contemporary author who passed away must have been 2014. He imagined a culture, the culture as he calls it, in which artificial intelligence is basically all powerful and has managed to make us completely independent of resources. So if you want to take a very far future look at what it means if there is nothing you can do as a human from birth to death, which could not be easier done by a machine and faster done by a machine and better done by a machine. What are your values then, and what do you strive then for? I see that there's a question for a name of one of the books. Actually, there are 10 books in this universe. The Culture, it's called The Culture. If you look it up online, there's a kind of a pseudo scientific article, brief notes on the culture by Ian M. Banks, where he describes this utopia anarchist culture ruled by AIs, but then not ruled because, well, let yourself be surprised. I have to promote this because it inspired me in a lot of ways to read these books. In a closer or nearer future, I think that it's all about learning, and it's all about becoming flexible in your idea of what a job is, what your job is, and how it changes all the time. We are in one situation more fortunate than we were when the steam engine was invented. There were a lot of jobs which were simply replaced by big power available in one place, and 100 years later, again, where simply jobs were lost when you had distributed power available wherever you needed it. These jobs were lost, and the qualifications the people had were very often very bodily. It was often on the matter of very physical training and retraining which was needed, and the training programs or systems were not that advanced as today. Today we often have the qualification in a much more virtual way, which makes them much easier transferable, and so retraining can more easily be achieved. And basically, I would expect that AI at least secures at least as many jobs as it destroys on this level, because as one job becomes obsolete, the training for a new job in a similar manner is much more easily achieved than it was in the first and second and third revolutions.
Yeah, I would just very briefly, I guess, say that I do agree that we have reskilling and obviously a major transformation. If I could recommend one book that I find very interesting in this specific domain, it would be Human Plus Machine, where there is a very interesting discussion on the jobs that will be performed by machines, jobs that will be performed probably for a long time solely by humans, and all those interesting intertwinings where you have bridges and combinations of both. And you will have people who will redesign interfaces that they are more human friendly. There will be people who will be working on the translation between what's human and what's machine. They will be teaching machines, or the other way around, interpreting. So I think it's a very interesting horizon of jobs lost and also jobs gained through this whole process. And you know, so far I remember reading, I think it was Martin Ford's The Rise of the Robots, and that vision was very scary about the future. And it was a very near future that he was kind of depicting based on data. And currently it turns out that, for instance, when you are predicting that certain, even physical jobs could be easily performed by machines, it turns out that those physical jobs have so many different intricate aspects of themselves that even if you are a cleaning person, your job is quite hard to be replaced by one machine. It will have to be replaced by many of them, and it's just not cost effective. So I think the pathway is more rocky than some people have foreseen earlier on.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm just seeing that there is one last question, and maybe we will shorten this up a little bit. But because we're talking about decision making, will managers and decision makers become in near future, very near future, within next 1 to 3 years, redundant due to AI solutions? Will it be the case already? And yes or no? Just a short question answer.
It's a no.
Like,
It's a
yeah.
no. On my side, it's a definitive no.
Okay, Wolfgang, I can see the indication.
It's for most jobs, it's a definite no. There are some jobs remaining which are so simple and so mechanistic that probably the people doing them don't like them either. So for them, perhaps it's a yes. Will concern one lawyer or another who is just doing what an IT can do
Yeah.
too. But
I mean, for sure, the quantitative works that people usually hate, like for lawyers reading throughout hundred thousands of books to find more information about a specific law, this kind of work will be getting reduced, as it is getting reduced anyway nowadays. So very, very interesting. Thank you to both of you for joining us today, and the community is very thankful for that, and we're looking forward in near future cooperating with you and having you in the community.